You can assemble one of the best squads on paper that the A-League has ever seen. You can sign a Brazilian superstar of world football. You can sign another Brazilian who was once on the cusp of a €10 million move to Fiorentina. Throw in a goal-scoring Pole, a German maestro, all to go with your English Joe Marston medal winner and your flurry of exciting young Australian talent. You can grab one of the country's up-and-coming coaches and play them out of your lovely new stadium, all with the aim of stepping up your dominance of the A-League and making a mark in Asia. You can win the Australia Cup to gain access to the second tier of Asian competition and give yourself a realistic shot at a continental crown. You can control all the controllables that you want. But when you're 4-3 down in the second leg of a round of 16 tie, away from home in sweaty Thailand, sometimes all you can do is kick a bloke in the balls and have him sent off to give yourself the little extra bit of breathing room to make your comeback. Ah, the beautiful game indeed. Everyone has a plan until you get kicked in the balls. Sydney FC through to the quarterfinals of the AFC Champions League 2 in dramatic fashion. The APL is restructuring its executive rank. The refs hit back at Germain. The Mariners crash out of the ACL Elite, but don't finish last, thanks to the Chinese conspiracy. The under-20s go perfect, and the Matildas are back on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan Avil. Joining me tonight is Poletti. Now, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let you get away with this at all, Poletti, but would you like to tell our audience at home how many minutes of last night's game you watched before you fell asleep?
I believe I probably watched about half an hour or so. So what happened was I missed the start because I forgot the game was on. I'm not going to lie. I forgot the game was on. Start. So I was watching an episode. I was watching an episode of Dirty Laundry. Then when that finished up, I'm just like, oh, okay. Game on. I'll put this on. 1-1. Everything's fine. Halftime. Turned it off. Went to bed. Put the stream on a little bit. Saw Sydney go 2-1 down. And I thought, well, how many times have we seen this before? It doesn't matter what Australian sides do. They go down in Asia early in the second half, and then they just absolutely collapse. And that's exactly what I expected again. Just, version 364 of the story that we've seen before. And imagine my surprise when I woke up this morning and I saw that Sydney went through 5-4 in aggregate.
Yeah, to be fair, that's exactly what I was thinking right up until Adrian Segicic put that screamer away to tie it up to 2-2 and send it to extras. Christian, by the time the game finished, just because how much time wasting Bangkok had done after the red card came, there was so much extra time, and then we went to proper extra time. It was I think it was like about 1:30 or something by the time the game was just wrapping up. It was a very late one.
You're always going to sense that there was time wasting, wasn't there? Because before the red card, there was going to be time wasting because I believe, was it going to go to extra time? That the scores were level.
Well, Bangkok were 2-1 up until like the 88th minute.
Yeah, so they had obviously the advantage, and then Sydney with the equaliser. Bangkok was still going to time waste, right? Because they were down a man, so until the 65th minute. So, yeah, a lot of time wasting tactics, and Sydney, to their credit, the way they prevailed because of that, I thought was really impressive away from home, and eventually got through, which is great, obviously, from an Australian football perspective.
Yeah, so we can talk about the things that actually happened in the game, but a little bit big picture. This is a really massive occasion for Sydney FC as a football club. They should be really congratulated for what they've done. We talked about the strength of the competition and whatever, but travelling in Asia is never easy, Poletti. This is the first time they have won a knockout tie in Asia in their club's history. That is a very momentous occasion.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. As when you look at Sydney's history in Asia, it's usually been in what we now have as the Champions League Elite, and I think they've made it through to the round of 16 once. Everything else has been group stage exits. Stop me if you've heard that one before. But yeah, so it's a good work by Sydney, even if it's not the competition they would prefer to be playing in. It is the competition that they are playing in, and you can only beat who's in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully they go on to win it, and then they can be in the ACL Elite with whoever finishes probably second on the A-leg ladder. We'll get to that a little bit later. But Christian, where do you rank this achievement? Because we talked about the strength of the competition. It's between where we would put the old Champions League and the AFC Cup that the Mariners won last year. This is a Bangkok side that was on something in the region of 30x games at home unbeaten. So I know that there's pushed to extra time here, but the Sydney FC have managed to then defeat this team that's had an incredible home record, incredibly difficult conditions. The players were absolutely out in their feet by the time that probably the 135th minute ticked over. It was quite the Herculean effort.
Yeah, I think people underestimate how big of a challenge it was for Sydney to go over there and actually get a result like that because, from a general Australian football fan point of view, you say, okay, Thai football, how strong can it really be? Bangkok, who are they? But then on the flip side, you've got Bangkok supporters saying, Australian clubs have performed pretty poorly in Asia. This should be a breeze in the park for us at home. So like the contrasting of that is fascinating. And like the conditions, everything, the pitch, just the way Sydney handled everything, I just thought the maturity really shone through. And it was great that it finally all came together because in the league, we've seen in parts that it hasn't quite clicked this season. But in Asia, when they do perform at this high standard, it's very scary to see like what they're actually capable of. And to take it into extra time and eventually take it out was obviously great to see, but there are a couple of weaknesses still I see in this Sydney side. One of them being, that first goal they conceded. There was about 6 Sydney players pressing in that one corner, and it took about a couple of passes for Bangkok to just completely split them apart, and then they just had this whole green patch of grass to run into. And then from there, they failed the offside trap as well in that same sequence of play and conceded that opening goal. Then obviously the second one they conceded was just poor playing out from the back. Corey Holman, I believe, lost the ball from the goal kick. And it's like, it's those little bits, like I've been saying in Asia, those mistakes are so costly. Eventually it didn't cost them in the end, but against a much tougher opponent, could be Jumbuk, sooner down the track, that could cost you. To eventually win this championship. To answer your question about the achievement, yes, it's a massive achievement, but like obviously wouldn't put it up there in terms of the treble from the Mariners last season. I think that was...
No, of course.
If you want to compare it to that, no. Because Sydney have got a long way to go, obviously, to winning this competition. Just considering the context of it all and their lack of history in Asia in terms of winning, it's massive for Sydney because they're such a big club in Australia. You want them to seem prevail and do well and fly the Australian flag for us. So, it was good to see him win, but hopefully they can keep this momentum going because when they produce performances like that, it's really good to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're sitting here, pardon me, on Thursday night. It's currently halftime in the Jeonbuk game. They are 5-0 up over their opposition on aggregate. So I think it's safe to say that Jeonbuk Hyundai from South Korea will be the Sky Blues' opponent in the next round. Poletti, those games are set to be played early to mid-March. There'll probably be a little bit of A-League fixturing worked around a little bit. I think there's the game at home to the Wellington Phoenix off memory in a couple of weeks' time is like 2 days out, so that'll probably be skipped over. And the league absolutely should be doing everything in their power to make it easy for Sydney because we want teams. How often can I bring up the coefficient and say how important it is for Australian football? It's massive. And for Sydney FC, they want to make an impact. They've got Douglas Costa, who's, in this game made his biggest contribution to a game of football since he's arrived. He scored the winning goal in the biggest moment of a continental knockout tie. That's kind of what you sign these guys up for.
That is what you sign them up for. I know you just identified the Wellington game there. That would be the absolute worst game to be moved, regardless of how this thing works out, because that is the game in which Sydney FC is set to debut its new Pride kit. It's supposed to be a double header,
no.
celebration of Pride, and it's got the men's double header, so both games are taking place at the Sydney Football Stadium. You'd be ruining so much there, and I understand wanting everyone to do well. Find another game to move. I don't care what it is, but you cannot. Just the amount of damage that would do to a campaign that's already taken a lot of collateral damage throughout, and I hope to expand on that more on the Dubcast either next week or the week after. I'm waiting for people to get back to me on certain things before I can talk about everything that's gone on there. I just think it's asking for an absolute disaster, just from a public relations standpoint, regardless of what it would mean from a footballing perspective. Which, as we've all said before, if you want to give your sides the best chance to compete in Asia, then the A-League has to be flexible with its scheduling, and they've shown this year at least that they are prepared to be flexible with the scheduling, moving things on the fly, manipulating the draws so that so that these sorts of things can be played. Like, this was something that didn't happen last year. You had the Mariners literally moving, basically playing every 3 days. Same with MacArthur. Like the Mariners for basically the entire season, MacArthur until they got knocked out, it was game, rest, game. Like that's literally all it was. So, yeah, I think footballing side good, public relations side bad. If moving that particular game, if there's another game that could be moved, I think it would be a lot better.
Yeah, interesting. That's a difficult line to walk, fair. In terms of this game, before we move on from it, Christian, I think we have to bring up Adrian Segacic again. So often he's just been the hero, not just scoring a bunch of goals off the bench. He got his start here in this one, but he still came up clutch at the exact moment Sydney FC needed him. We're in this era of all these great young Australian players moving overseas. It's hard to imagine that he's not getting a lot of attention right now.
No, it was great to see him score that goal, equaliser, to take it into extra time. Great strike as well, outside the box, just to take that bit of a gamble, because beforehand, Sydney were trying different things, whipping balls into the box, trying to sort of play through Bangkok with the man advantage. Didn't quite work, and then Segacic, with that strike, just sort of a nothing to lose mentality, and just hit the ball and back of the net, right in the corner. It was a brilliant strike. And what that does for his confidence, so I couldn't imagine. Hopefully this continues now for him for the rest of the season, because Sydney, they're still fighting for that top 6 spot as well, and domestically as well, don't forget. So, even if he, I don't know, potentially makes a couple of starts here and there, I doubt it. I think he's more impactful off the bench in terms of this season, at least. I think he just more of that cameo role. It suits him, and I think Tale knows that as well. But when he does come on, you can tell he really does make that impact, and fresh legs, he can make a real difference. And for a Sydney side who we've talked about the depth, like, he's one of those players who can really turn it on when they need him the most.
What's funny for me about that goal was that they had a corner a few minutes before and they worked it around to Adrian in that exact same spot, and he came pretty close with it. And then he got it again, and this one he scored, and it's just like, you got to close him down at some point. And after he'd scored that goal, he still got 2 more chances in regular time from that exact same position. You figured the Bangkok players would have figured out to close him down on the edge of the box like that, but they let him have it anyway. But yeah, another great game for him. And look, he got his chance, I think, through illness. I think Klamalo, and there was another player out, so they had to shuffle up the lineup a little bit. But if anyone deserves some starting minutes, I think it's Segacic for me. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Roundball FC YouTube channel. If you weren't aware, we've got a different channel where every week we post our A-League men's rounds preview and predictions videos. We go through every game coming up on that weekend, tell you why we think different teams will win, give you our tips, and we have a crack at predicting some of the outcomes as well. And we have a bit of a game that goes along with it. The stands are quite tight. We always argue about who gets the votes every week, but it's a bit of fun. So if you want a bit more of a detailed preview on every game that's happening in the coming weekend, the links are in the description of this video and podcast. Go check it out. The other club Asian game during the week, Poletti, was the Mariners finishing off their Asian Champions League elite campaign again in disappointing fashion. That makes it 0 wins from 8 attempts, although their official record will read from 7 attempts, but we'll get to that. Interestingly, in this game, the average age of this squad was ridiculously young. There was only Christian Theo Harris that was over the age of 23. Hayne Eames, a 16-year-old, got the captain's armband for 25 minutes or something like that. They lost Sainsbury to injury, Caltex to suspension. Who else did they lose? They lost a bunch of players, obviously. Mikhail Docker through that concussion. Ryan Edmondson from injury as well. So they were really out on their feet. They had barely any senior players that could actually make the field. And it showed. They did all right for a little while, but away to a team like Kawasaki, who I'm sure were rotated as well. It was never going to be easy. But the intrigue here, and this is relevant to another Australian, Kevin Muscat as well, is that Shanghai Port, his team, were playing Yokohama F. Marinos on the final match day, and they lost. And that should have sent them out of the competition. However, thanks to the compatriots, Shandong Taishan, they withdrew from the competition, or considered to be withdrawn by the AFC, after they informed the competition that they wouldn't be reporting for their final game against Ulsan. Now, the statement on their website, which I'm told, I don't read Chinese, but the translation says, due to serious physical discomfort of the team members and after evaluation by the medical team, the players were unable to form a team to participate against Ulsan Football Club. So the result of this is that it's not like it's just a forfeit. The game is won by Ulsan. They were stripped away from the competition in its entirety. So all of their previous results had therefore just been removed. So the other Chinese teams don't play the Chinese teams. So Kevin Muscat's side, Shanghai, they still had 8 games and they finished on 8 points. But then the team that was supposed to be sitting above them, Pohang Steelers, they were on 9 points and set to slide into the knockout stage in 8th position. They've had 3 points taken away, and all of a sudden Kev is sliding up with 8 points into the 8th position, and all the official media coming out of the AFC is that they have qualified for the knockout stage. So Shandong was still mathematically in it as well. They probably needed at least a point to qualify, but their withdrawal has completely shaken it up, and all of a sudden Pohang Steelers from Korea thought they were sitting pretty, but they've had 3 points stripped away from them. And the other result of that is that the Mariners haven't finished last. They finished 7th instead.
Default, the 2 sweetest words in the English language. Look, this is one of those things that could only happen in the AFC, right? Like, it's baffling how, just regulations and just teams be getting moved around because now results don't count, but only affects some of the teams. This would not have happened if they had have just stuck with the group stage. But to be fair,
Poletti,
UEFA has to go to a league stage. Therefore, the AFC has to go to a league stage. It's like that Borat meme, like UEFA does something, I have to do something.
To be fair, though, the ACL2 also had a team pull out. So Mahan Bagan, there were some political issues there with travel. India wouldn't let them travel to a certain region. I honestly can't remember exactly what it was off the top of my head. So they had just a group of 3 teams, and the top 2 qualify.
I was literally about to bring that point up, Lockie. Great minds think alike.
Well, that's a group phase, right?
It is, but I'm saying is that it was very but the regulations say the same. The top 2 sides advanced regardless, right? This is
sure.
This is a team literally having their advancement taken away from them because they've had a game stripped away from them through no fault of their own. It's baffling. This wouldn't have happened if there was just group stages, but that's an issue for another day where we could talk about, in the fallout of, the first year of the Champions League Elite. So I'm sure would make a great off-season discussion with Matt Olsen. Should take note of that, Lockie. So, good on Muskie, I guess. Congratulations, you made it through. And good on the Mariners for not finishing last, even though you didn't win a single game.
Christian, how do you reflect on the league phase from an Australian perspective? Obviously, the Mariners are an extreme example of this kind of competitive balance mechanism of the A-League really hurting Australian teams in Asia. They had 2 years in a row of their best players being stripped away. They're having to put in 23, essentially an under-23s team into one of the premier competition in Asia. Do you think that going forwards, the average Australian premiers going through this competition, does a league phase suit us, or was a group stage more advantageous?
Like, it's a very small sample size, and especially because of the Mariners, and we already saw this coming, didn't we, that they were going to really struggle in this competition. I think we still need to see a couple more seasons with a few more teams, but like personally, I predict that it would favour the Australian clubs better than if it was just the group stage, because you've got a couple more games up your sleeve to make up for some drop points here and there, whereas 6 games in the group stage. In years past, we saw that Australian clubs have struggled, right, with the 2 games, playing each side, home and away. It was difficult. And now it's, just for example, you can play Shanghai Port at home, but you don't have to play them away from home, right? As opposed to you'd have to play them both, in the group stage. I think that's where I think it's a positive outcome for Australian clubs. But again, as soon as more clubs start to enter this league phase, and we can really start to determine if it suits us or not, because like I said, the Mariners, it must be said, they were pretty disappointing, weren't they? To not even pick up a win. We didn't predict that. We knew they were going to struggle, but to perform as badly as that was still a bit of a shock. So no, I'd love to see a couple of the bigger clubs stamp their mark, and hopefully this new league phase can lead us in the right direction in terms of that coefficient, as you always touch on, Lockie, to improve it, because that's what we need, just to at least get out of the group phase for some of these seasons, because in past it's either been bottom of the group, third in the group, they just don't make it through, and those points all add up, don't they, at the end of the day? So small steps, but hopefully we can accumulate some points soon.
Yeah, I really, really hope that Sydney FC go on to win the AFC2, because then I think they'll get entry into qualifying, and then we could have 2 Australian teams. Hopefully, this isn't a biased fan thing, but Victory being someone that has really solid backing and has the ability to turn a squad around like Sydney FC do. If we had those 2 teams, I think that would be a really good test for what Australian clubs could do in this new format. I think that would be really interesting. Let's bring it back to the A-League, because there's been plenty going on off the field during the week. Poletti, the first thing is that Nick Garcia, who's the commissioner of the A-Leagues, is out of the APL. Stephen Conroy, who is the independent chair, is going to take on an interim role as executive chief. They've been going through a big reorganisation of the APL in terms of their structures and how they go about the business side of running a football league. And this is the latest step.
It is. Simon Hill is the first to report this, followed by Joey Lynch in ESPN. I don't even know. I don't even know where to start with this, because let's take it from the top. So, Nick Garcia relieved of his role as A-League's commissioner. When was the last time any of us heard from Nick Garcia? Like, honestly, when was the last time any of us heard from Nick Garcia? Like,
season launch.
It was the Auckland launch, the season launch, right? Like, we haven't heard from him in yonks.
And he's left in silence as well to top it off.
But I understand that, commissioner is a very broad role, but for everything that the APL has tried to do since they took over, they've essentially tried to Americanize the A-Leagues, right? Expansion fees, keep the closed shop, basically everything you would have seen an American sports league do. And what do American sports leagues have? They have commissioners. Commissioners front the media. They're talking. They're doing this. They're the voice for the owners, right? Nick Garcia was absolutely none of that, because the APL, despite a lot of a lot of media members requesting, was rarely made available to the media. Nor was Stephen Conroy, who's now taken on the role as executive chief. So I don't know what Garcia's role was supposed to be, but it certainly didn't seem to fit the title of commissioner, whatever it was.
Do you think that's a bad thing, though? Because I would argue that you're spot on. The whole Americanization of the licenses, the franchise fees, and the role of the commissioner is very American, right? But I would put a line in the sand between when Nick and Stephen came in, and obviously that lines up with when Danny Townsend left as well, of a clear shift in strategy where they wanted the clubs to be the ones that were interacting directly with fans, right? And they intentionally wanted to play the kind of Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, maybe pulling some strings here and there, but not being the one that is interacting day to day with fans. And I think largely that strategy has worked for them over the past 18 months.
I don't disagree with anything you've just said. I just think that would have been something that could have been made a little bit more clearer, or maybe change the title instead of using commissioner, given everything that we know about what the APL has tried to do since it's taken over. It had some negative connotations with it, might be the best way to word that.
Yeah.
So then in a subsequent statement that was released by the APL quite literally minutes after the Joey Lynch article dropped on ESPN, this statement didn't acknowledge Garcia's exit, but the APL announced that its board had requested existing chairperson Stephen Conroy take on an executive role. Statement read, with significant progress made both on and off the field, the board has unanimously asked Chairman Stephen Conroy to take on an executive role to lead the final phase of the APL's transformation. It says this transformation, but it's based on previous part of the statement has implied the APL's transformation. As executive chairman, Conroy will oversee the optimization of APL's operations. Once this process is complete, he will return to his non-executive role. No one's heard from Stephen Conroy since he's really taken on this role. No one seems to know what he's doing as chairman. Again, despite repeat requests from media, no one seems to, just never talks. No one seems to hear from him. And I totally understand that as a private company, the APL doesn't have to, deal with these sorts of things if they don't want to. But I mean, I don't know. This whole thing just feels like a mess when it just felt like the A-Leagues is going on the right path. And they sort of touted this in this media statement as well. They talked about, the positives, the increased attendance at games, the increased viewership, and, there's a whole heap of other things going on behind the scenes. So it just seems like, something's going on over here, but look over there. Look over there. Here's where we want you to look, right? While ignoring everything that's going on over here, sort of vibe. I will believe it when I see it as to whether or not this is a good thing or not.
Yeah, so personally, I'm willing to put my faith in the APL for this decision. And I think, as I just said, I think largely their strategy of acting behind the scenes, Christian, has been a constructive one. And it's kind of like, you're watching a game of football and it's close, it's 1-1, 70th minute, and then the best winger's coming off, right? And you're thinking, why the hell is the coach dragging the best player when we really need a goal? Maybe he's injured, maybe he's copped a knock, maybe, he's been sick during the week, and then the coach isn't going to tell the fans that information because then the other team has that information. So you lose a little bit of the understanding of why certain people are making decisions. So I think we don't know exactly why this decision has been made, but personally, given the track record that the APL have had over the 18 months, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and believe purely on faith that they're doing this for the betterment of the league and for the right reasons.
Yeah, you'd hope that a bit of a review was put in place before making this decision. It is quite weird that Nick Garcia wasn't mentioned in that statement. No acknowledgement whatsoever, which is a bit weird when I first read that. But I mean, you're right in a sense. Like, if people from the APL started talking, maybe that would have been a bad thing because in years past they always say the wrong things, don't they? And
exactly.
You get fan criticism and all that stuff. So in that sense, it's probably best to just stay quiet. Don't say anything. But at the same time, I can understand the frustration from fans, and Poletti is probably in that same camp because you want that honesty and transparency, especially with a decision like this. Like, just a bit more of why it's happened, a bit more behind the scenes. I know you don't want to reveal too much, but give the fans a bit more. I think that's what fans crave. And to your point, Lockie, as well, I understand you don't have to speak to the media every single day. The clubs, that's part of their vision, right? To give the clubs more responsibility in that aspect. But at the same time, just at least be a bit more open and say, this is what's happening. I think that's where you've got to draw that fine balance.
Yeah, interesting one. We'll sit and wait on what the effects of that move will be. Also going on, it was quite a busy week for you in particular, Poletti. We talked on Tuesday about Germain and his exit from the league, and the refereeing standards was part of the reason why he has departed MacArthur. Now, Football Australia, with head of referees John Moss, had a sit-down meeting with select media on Wednesday. Poletti, you were a part of that meeting. And I guess it comes across to me as that really picking the right moment to reaffirm all the good things that the referees are doing.
I mean, it's certainly a coincidence.
I don't believe in those.
I don't necessarily believe in coincidences, but, sit down, the media. I literally just talked about a group of people not meeting with the media, so I can't be too critical when, people actually do meet with the media. So this was quite a good, sit down to be part of. Some of the key highlights I thought, from this, talking about VAR. So there's now 2 people solely responsible for VAR in terms of coaching. They're also coaching more referees to be part of VAR. So that way, when they're less limited in who they have to use when referees get pulled away for tournaments, because Australia is still considered a world leader in this space, and John Moss was, emphasising that aspect. Like Alex King right now is away doing the under-20 Asian Cup, I believe, off the top of my head. So that's arguably the premier ref in the A-League men's.
Absolutely.
Who's currently not available because he's off doing an Asian tournament. So they've also brought in someone from Hawkeye who is renowned in the area for being a lead practitioner around, this technology. Direct quote from John Moss: "We want to make sure that our VAR system is the best in the world. We're already ahead of the game. The in-stadium announcements have been copied and developed by other countries. The Premier League has finally taken the step in terms of the in-stadium announcements, and they've been contacting us for information about how we develop that." So for all of the times that we hear, the A-League's not the Premier League, right? The Euro snobs, right? Well, the Premier League's actually looking to us on something, so maybe we should celebrate that. I think that's positive to take there. In terms of the officials overall, so there's going to be a restructure at the end of the season with only the top officials to do A-League's games next season. There'll be 2 panels of 12 officials, one for the A-League men's, one for the A-League women's. And they want them to be capable of doing 3 jobs, which are on-field, referee, 4th official, and in the case of A-League men's, VAR. The Championship and NPL will be the next tier down to help referees develop, with the FA taking on select NPL games away from the member federations to help give referees experience. So there's going to be more of that development hands-on. And, there might be, this was also given as an idea by Moss, something that the Premier League do, where they have certain games in the lower tiers that the Premier League refs go and do on a weekly basis to sort of, keep that up. And so the idea of perhaps bringing A-League refs down to do championship games, if it's a
for
big
education,
game, or if it's for education, or if it's a final or something like that, or if it's a big momentous occasion, the idea of doing that. So that's, I think, only a positive, is they're really committed to the development of referees at all levels.
I know you got some more stats to go through, but I'll just jump in briefly. I think, what John is clearly trying to indicate is that they're doing a lot behind the scenes to increase the quality of the Australian officiating process, and the Australian officiating, as I pointed out on Tuesday, is actually quite highly thought of in world sport, not just football, world sport. And Christian, I think this is actually one thing that's been a little bit missed, and we probably haven't talked about this enough as well as part of the Australian Championship, is that the gap between the NPL and the A-League was not just a player gap in terms of player skill on the park. It's coaches, it's administrators, it's media, and it is officiating as well. There is a big gap. Poletti talked about the idea of big referees going down. We saw Jack Morgan go and do that South Melbourne Preston game in the Cup last year. Like that's the kind of thing we're talking about. And having, the championship exist allows you to have this more elites panel of A-League refs specifically to do A-League games and still have that level underneath that is a gap between the two competitions that further increases the effectiveness of these development programs.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we see the pyramid now coming together with this championship phase, and it's the same thing now with the referees, right? Where, you've got this system in place where the gap is starting to close and there is more being done behind the scenes, like you said, Lockie, which is great because, I think in the past couple of years, I think a lot of people have been deterred away from refereeing because of, the abuse that they receive and all of this. And I think a report came out, I forgot when, but, the increase in abuse and like parents on the sidelines and all that. So hopefully like more training courses, more support, a bit more money invested will hopefully, help grow the officiating standards, because that's what we need, right? If we want to help build this second division and get up and running off the ground, you need that gap to really tighten. Then that obviously helps with the first division, the A-League, and then it sort of trickles down, doesn't it? So yeah, hopefully if that all comes together, then, we should be fine.
And there was a number of directives that were introduced at the start of the season, Poletti, to combat some of the frustrations that a lot of fans and stakeholders have had in refereeing in the past. And there are some stats that they gave as well that backs up that those have been effective changes.
Yeah, so there's been a 21% decrease in yellow cards and a 47% decrease in red cards in the A-League men, and the two comparison points picked for that were round 19 of the 2023-24 season, so round 1 to round 19, and round 1 to round 19 of the 2024-25 season, despite what I've written in the rundown where I've put the same year for both points. But yeah, so there's been 100 less yellow cards, going from 4.2 per game average to 3.38 per game average, which is, according to John Moss, in line with global standards. And there's gone from 19 reds to 10 red cards in the A-League men's. One of the ideas at the start of the season was creating more free-flowing football, less fouls, less cards, those sorts of things, a higher threshold of what constitutes a yellow card, and that's clearly been seen in the data that's been presented. From an A-League women's perspective, they've gone... it's an 11% reduction in yellow cards, 236 to 209. But there's been a 60% increase in red cards, going from 5 to 8, with most of those coming from the Newcastle Jets.
Some crazy ones.
They've had some weird seasons.
Yeah,
they've had a weird season, definitely. And so just going in on that one a little bit, if you take the Natasha Pryor red card away, which has a lot of controversy around it. It's 5 red cards to 7 cards, regardless of whether you agree with some of the dog-so calls that have been made in A-League women's or not. So that isn't too...
It's a good decrease for what they wanted. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not that bad. Ideally, you'd probably like that to be equal or less in terms of red cards, particularly in A-League women, but overall, they've had some very nice numbers in terms of the way that cards have been awarded. Particularly, the one that stands out to me there is going from 480 yellow cards last season at the round 19 cutoff to 379 yellow cards this season at the round 19 cutoff. 101 less cards. That means less players sitting on the sideline for yellow card accumulation with suspension, and that's only a good thing because we want to see our players on the park, all right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a time and a place for this. I remember there was a victory game, I want to say against MacArthur, that I think it was Jack Morgan who was refereeing. Like that one, there was he kept the cards in the pocket all day, right? And it went the opposite way. And those kind of teething issues happen. But overall, we were seeing last year red cards being handed out for fun. I don't think we have any numbers here, but penalties for handballs being handed out for fun, and little contact penalties that we've seemed to have gotten rid of. And if you don't like the data approach, then go have a look at Mitch Langrak's interview on the A-League's website that Sasha Pisani just wrote. He literally talks in there about how the A-League, there's more ball in play, there's more football being played, it's quicker, it's more free-flowing. The effects are positive ones. I'm aware we've been talking about refereeing for a while now, so we might move on quickly. But good change is being done. And for Germain's comments, he actually did another interview with Channel 10 just after his departure, Christian, with Tyra Rushton. He said, it's his career and he feels bad about leaving MacArthur. The refs weren't the reason, but they were a reason, why he reconsidered at that specific moment. And then credit to Tara, because she asked the question head on, if you hadn't been suspended, this is for the obscene gesture, would you still be a MacArthur player? And he said yes. He said yes, that the suspension, the actions of the referees was the reason that he is no longer a MacArthur player. I thought that was astounding.
I'm just laughing at Poletti's reaction right now. They can't believe it. But that just confused me because I'm listening to the start of that interview and he's like, yes, it's one of the reasons, the refereeing, but it's not the sole reason. And then at the end with Tara's question, you just said, he just literally admitted that he would still be in the league if it wasn't for that one incident. Make it make sense. What is going on? Poletti touched on it before the recording. I think MacArthur are honestly better off without him. I think I spoke on the podcast on Tuesday's release that, perhaps there was something going on behind the scenes and the players might be a relief for them to say, he was probably a bit of a nutcase, probably to try and, somehow put it lightly. I don't know if that is, but, I know he wore the captain's armband and he was supposed to be a real leader, but on the pitch, he didn't seem like it, right? I mean, he made a few rash decisions. In terms of the maturity, you expected better from him. In terms of the quality in a footballing sense, yes, it's going to be obviously a massive loss for MacArthur to, obviously try and make finals because of the players that they did lose last month, and that's going to be difficult. But at the same time, it's like one of those rotten apples where, yes, you're out of the club, and it's probably maybe a blessing in disguise for MacArthur. And another point that he actually raised was, he's tackling this new adventure, and he even confessed that it might turn out bad, but hey, it's my career. That's something on the lines of his. And I'm thinking, why won't you just stay in the A-League and just play it out if you don't know for sure that this new gamble is going to pay off, right? It's just see off the season, and from there, if you want to leave, just leave. I just think it sets a really poor example, especially being a supposed leader of the club. It's a very bad look.
Yeah, I think it's poor as well. But as we said on Tuesday, football is a big world, and you can get away with things like that. At his point in his career, he can run away to Japan with a contract and kind of be okay with things. But disappointing for sure. But he's gone now, and MacArthur are going to have to deal with that as well. It's unescapable that he's a hell of a footballer. He's their all-time record goal scorer, and they're going to have to catch that up somewhere if they want to make the finals.
Find me a league around the world where you don't get suspended for making an obscene gesture towards a match official. Find me a league around the world. Ville, please do. Okay, maybe 2-game suspension, a little bit, on the harsher side of things, but you essentially told a referee in one of the harshest ways possible that you disagreed with their decision, even if, language barrier and intent and, all those fun things that can't be calculated. Just good riddance.
But even then, it was still 2 games. It wasn't like it was a 12-game suspension.
No,
okay, put your arms up in the air. It's it's 2 games, and that's
halfway through it.
I know, and it was a fair. I reckon it was honestly fair. For the way it happened, you can't have any arguments. I don't get it.
All right, let's move on. Some slightly more exciting news. The under-20s going along quite nicely in the Asian Cup. 2-1 win against China to take them top of the group. They rotated quite heavily as well. Only 2 players were retained in the starting lineup from the previous game. Thiago Quintal and Benny as well, Daniel Benny. 2 quick-fire goals from City star Mehmeti and Luis Agosti as well. In like the blink of an eye from the restart, really, it was quite impressive. But they're through. So they finished top of the group. They're going to line up against Iraq in the quarterfinals, which, of course, on Saturday night is the World Cup qualifying game. If they win that, they are into the Under-20 World Cup. But also, they should have ambitions of going on and winning this tournament as well, because they've been playing some quite nice football as well. So we'll pick that back up next week and we'll be able to tell you if they've made the World Cup or not, which will be quite exciting. But there is also some other national team duties starting on Friday morning. Likely by the time you're listening to this, you will already know the score. But Poletti, the Matildas are back in action in the She Believes Cup. You've done a big preview of this over on the Dubcast, and we put out a little promo on the main YouTube channel for Ramble Australia as well. But this is a big opportunity for the Matildas. 3 competitive fixtures coming up against Japan, USA and Colombia to find a little bit more connection and development while still without a permanent coach.
Yeah, I mean, I've done, as best I can to emphasise the importance of these fixtures. This is essentially the closest that the Matildas will get to competitive football between now and the Asian Cup on home soil. It is a, to borrow a phrase from Burke, a Mickey Mouse tournament.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's basically the American version of the Cup of Nations. If anyone remembers when Football Australia has done that in the past, it's literally
it's
round
an invitational.
Robin. Yeah, it's an invitational tournament. But they get to play AFC rivals Japan. They get to play the USA, as you said. They get to play Colombia as well, a nation well on the rise in football. It's got some young superstars in Myra Ramirez and Linda Caicedo. The Americans, who seemingly went through 6 months of problems with Vlatko Antonovsky and then just became good again. Absolutely ridiculous that the USA could just turn it around that quickly. It didn't have to suffer at all. For me, the game that you'll probably have already watched by the time this comes out, if you were watching it, is the Japan game, which kicks off the Matildas campaign on Friday morning. To me, that is the most important one here, because it doesn't matter how good of a result you get against the USA or Colombia. If you get a result, we've seen the Matildas get good results before against non-Asian opposition just before major tournaments. And then absolutely fail at the Asian Cup. The one that springs to mind was 2-match friendly series against the USA here in Australia in 2021. And then that was a 3-0 loss, I believe, and a 1-1 draw. 1-1 draw against the Americans, great result. And then 3 months later, get bounced out of the quarterfinals by South Korea at the Asian Cup, and had Australia not been hosting the World Cup, would not have qualified for that World Cup, because the Asian Cup is tied to World Cup qualification and is still for 2026, the last time that will happen. So having a good Asian Cup is absolutely paramount, and that's why I'm looking at the Japan game in particular. I don't care if it's a win. What I want to see is a good quality performance with the potential to grow on that. Particularly as you look ahead to the April window with the 2 friendlies against South Korea, another top side in Asia.
Yeah, very nice. What we're going to do as well on the Dubcast YouTube channel is we're going to put little reaction videos up from every game talking about the performance and what happened during the game as well. So I'm going to say conservatively maybe 1 p.m. on Friday afternoon is maybe what we're going to target. If that's the time on your clock right now, then beautiful. It might be just uploaded. But go have a look if you want to keep in touch with that tournament. Let's go to our weekend look for round 20 in the A-League men's competition. As always, we're going to kick off with our burning question. And for me, I'm heading straight to the Melbourne Derby on Saturday night. And which Melbourne side is going to earn the right to challenge Adelaide for that Asian Champions League elite spot? We know that Auckland are flying. For me, they're very, very close to putting the line into them for the premiership. But of course, the situation that they're in, being a New Zealand team, an Oceanic and Asian, no one can really quite decide. They won't get to qualify. So it'll be the second place team if that event does occur. So Adelaide are there at the moment, but they lost to the Jets on the weekend. Who knows? And these 2 Melbourne sides, as much as it is about bragging rights, a win here sets them apart and puts them further towards that top 2. So that's my burning question. Poletti, how about you go next?
I hope someone has made Bill Foley well aware that they can't compete in the Asian Champions League Elite. For me, my burning question is, will we notice anything different with Stephen Conroy taking on a larger role? So the reason this is my burning question is, much like we discussed, the idea that everything's taken place behind the scenes. There's been little to no public facing from either of, Garcia or Conroy. They've made essentially a big song and dance about this. They put out a press release indicating that this is what's going to happen. And so, will we notice anything different, or has this just all been some kind of smoke and mirrors illusion where it's literally all taking place behind the scenes? And as much as we want transparency from the APL, could this have just not been a release, and this is just something that we hear 3 months down the line, where it's like, okay, these are the changes that have been made. This is why it happened. Thanks for coming. So I hope we see something different. Maybe we see Conroy getting out and about at a couple of games, doing a little bit of, appearances on camera. Maybe he makes an appearance at the derby on Saturday night. Just something to show us that this has, been worth it, essentially.
All right, Christian.
My burning question for this round: who is the real deal between West United and Adelaide? I've simply gone for this because, let's face it, these are two sides. We did not expect them to be in these positions, right? Adelaide challenging for first, West United, potentially making the top six. It's like they potentially. Well, we had them probably maybe to not make the finals, even maybe bottom four, especially West United, and to have the seasons that they're having. It's been great, but the past couple of weeks, you've seen this slight drop off, especially last week, West United, albeit against a very good Auckland side, losing 2-0 at home, then Adelaide with that shock loss at home to the Newcastle Jets. It's like, these two teams facing off each other, who's going to come out on top? Because whoever wins this, I think, goes a long way to progressing and securing their spot in the finals, even though there's 6-7 games to go after this. So yeah, I think it is a massive game for both sides, and who's more mature, who has a bit more experience to come out on top. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Very nice. Yeah, I think obviously the beauty of this season has been how competitive that middle pack is, and just we're getting so many of these games now where those teams are playing each other, and it makes it so much more competitive. They mean so much more. It's really fun. Worst case scenario. Now, this might be a little bit of a hyperbole, but the build up on Saturday is obviously the Kiwi derby. And my worst case scenario is that Wellington don't make a pass in their forward third. They've just had that look about them. I know Tim Payne is returning. Alex Roof is coming back into the team. Maybe the new signing for Nanj is coming in as well. I don't know. Maybe we'll see a little bit different Wellington Phoenix outfits. Derby, anything can happen. But going on some of their recent performances, it's a legitimate concern for me that they don't push the ball around in the top end a little bit, Poletti.
Yeah, I mean, look, as you said, hyperbole, but if they don't get... for me, I think the key stat coming out of that game will be touches in opposition box. Because if there's got a big duck egg on that stat, then, oh boy, the Phoenix might be in a lot of trouble this season.
Yeah.
But my worst case scenario is that the referees make a mistake on a huge call that decides a game. In the week in which Germain basically, threw his toys out of the cot and left the A-Leagues and blamed the referees for it, when you've got, John Moss coming out and saying, all these wonderful things about what the referees have done this season, which is true. They've done a lot of good things this season. To then just throw all that into the spotlight with a missed VAR call or a referee getting a decision wrong, I think that would easily be the worst case scenario.
And of course, the week where we back them up pretty hard as well. Go on, Christian.
I've gone for the derby, so less than 25,000 attendance, I think, would sort of be not an indictment on the derby, but, you're looking, at least a decade ago, this fixture was up there with the Sydney derby, right? And that's not the case anymore by a large stretch. We know the Sydney derby, that's the main fixture on the calendar, for the A-League, for the men's competition. So, you said, Lockie, before recording, 21 to 22,000 potentially might
guess.
be a realistic target. But I just think it's a sad indictment of where the derby has gone in the past few seasons. Yes, it's the last fixture of the season. It's not a Christmas derby, so that can play a factor as well. But I just love to see a great turnout. You know, as you said, it's battling for that second place for the Asian Champions League Elite, third versus fourth. This is a massive game. So, yeah, would love to see a big turnout.
Yeah, it's funny. I was watching Total A-Leagues and James Dodd and Tommy Orr, they did their, what are the biggest derbies, rivalries? And the Melbourne Derby has really fallen down the pecking order. And I think that's probably quite representative. You've got the Sydney Derby, which is easily number one. And then you can probably, depending on who you are, you're throwing in any version of the original rivalry, the New Zealand Derby, or the Big Blue, right? In that kind of 2 to 4 spot. And then the Melbourne Derby is probably at the end of it now. That's probably just where we're at. And it's unfortunate. It used to be the biggest game on the calendar, as you say.
Do you remember when we had that argument at the start of the season to put which game first on the rundown sheet? I think the Auckland game when they had that crazy in the penalty. I think it was the Sydney game from memory. And I was like, you should put the Melbourne Derby first because that should be, on paper, the biggest fixture. And you disagreed. And that's literally where these fixtures come, right? You've got to argue to like where to place it, on our rundown sheet in terms of most important. So that's where, the sad element, comes into it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. Pretty good. Ping from distance to finish us off. I reckon Sydney FC could drop out of the 6 again. They're squeaking in at the moment just on goal difference. And by the looks on the players' faces and the beads of sweat dripping off them in Thailand on Wednesday night, they look absolutely knackered. They're not going to get a chance to go home. They're going to fly straight to Perth. And that's just so much travel, so much energy being expended. I don't see them winning this game. I could very easily see them lose it. And if you're going to lose a game, we know how tight it is. Teams are going to overtake you. So that's my ping. Poletti?
My ping is that there will be multiple red cards this weekend. So
Doubling down.
As I have been talking about on the predictions game, which you can see at the Roundball FC YouTube channel, last week we had 29 straight games without a red card. I predicted that would end 5 games, no red cards. If we got to 34, I've said again this week that we won't get to 40 without a red card. But I'm going to double down and add to it. I think there will be multiple red cards this weekend as a result. I just, this is something we think isn't going to happen, but it has a chance of happening. I think that, we're going to stop the record going any further in style.
Sticking to your guns. I like it. Christian, finish us off.
Yeah, this one sort of ties into your worst case scenario, Lockie. I've gone for Wellington to keep a clean sheet against Auckland. So, don't make a pass in the final third. Just sit back, defend the whole 90 minutes, just get the 0-0 draw, get the point and move on. I can see that happening.
So this game's just going to take place entirely in the middle third of the pitch, right? It's like a futsal court. Let's just play this game on a futsal court, right? 11v11 on a futsal court. What could go wrong?
It's interesting.
I would love to see Chiefy's tactics with the 5v5 futsal. I'd love to hear that analysis.
It's interesting you talk about the middle of the park like that because Jacob Spoonley was talking on A-League off air. And this is something that I hadn't really noticed either, but the way that Wellington play, they really love to be able to get into the middle of the field kind of area and launch out from there. They don't kind of stick to the wings all the time. Obviously, not many balls in behind unless Costa's got a really good run, right? They like to use Rufa, and he hasn't been there for a little while, as that pivot and play through the middle. And if they do live in the middle, then that might actually benefit Wellington and how they like to play. As we're getting a little cameo appearance from Camper just at the end of is it Sam? You're on mute, Poletti.
Sorry, I thought I pressed that back on. This is Alex Kidiak.
Alex, sorry, my mistake. How you doing, Alex? All right, we're clearly at that point of the night now where we have to say goodbye. That will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Christian Montegan, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Lockie.
Cheers, Poletti.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back on Tuesday as usual for our review of round 20 of A-League men's football. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your football. Enjoy your derbies. No matter how many people show up, it's going to be a good time, I'm sure. But thanks again for listening. We'll see you later. Goodbye.